when kids come here, I think of that too. And I think I am a representation of the goodwill of this community and around the world that makes Make-A-Wish possible. I am fortunate enough to stand in the shoes of the CEO of this organization and to be with a family. I'll often get down on my knees so I'm not looking down at a kid, because he's my boss. You guys probably talk about servant leadership, right? You guys talk about servant leadership here. And so my job, once I became CEO of this thing, I work for everybody. I work for everybody. I work for the donors. I work for my staff. I work for the Wish Kids. I work for the families. But most importantly, I work to make sure that I am representing what I believe is one of the most pure brands in the world at addressing human suffering. And it's the purity of it and the amount of love that comes out of communities. I get to represent it. So it's a big responsibility, but that's how I feel. That's how I'm able to maintain a level of work that is it's pretty demanding.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to On Authentic Leadership with the Colonel and the Coach. I'm the Colonel, Matt Smith, and I am joined by my co-host, Cam Ellsworth. And today we have a very special guest, Jamie Hathaway, who is the president and CEO of Make-A-Wish Vermont and Make-A-Wish Northeast New York. Jamie is not just a president and CEO of an exceptionally important organization which grants wishes to children. I consider him a dear friend and someone who you'll get to know here in a second, who is just profound in his thinking and who, in my opinion, is an empath at heart and who just wants to help people and help humanity. So Jamie, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Cam. Thank you, Matt. I'm glad to be here. I've got my coffee. I've got a whole pot of fresh French press sitting right here. So I've got a whole hour. Let's do it.
Awesome. So Jamie, if you could just give us a quick snippet, just some of the things you've done, because you've been all over the world. I mean, all the way from Vietnam to just a lot of things you've done here in North America, to include the Make-A-Wish. But if you can just give our listeners and our viewers a sense of you, I think that would help kind of set the stage for the next. So
yeah, love it. So hi. My name's Jamie Hathaway, and I'm the president and CEO of Make-A-Wish Vermont and Northeast New York. We're a recently merged chapter of Make-A-Wish Vermont and Make-A-Wish Northeast New York. Our merger became finalized in March. And what it did was that merger stabilized the region right here, right? So if you imagine Make-A-Wish of the old days where you didn't have immediate communication like we do now, right? So having these smaller chapters joined together made a lot of sense and saved us a lot of money. So we grant 120 wishes per year in the region, 20,000 square miles. So it's all of Vermont and 15 counties of Northeast New York. So that's just north of the Hudson Valley region to Canada. I have a staff of 10. We split our staff between folks at the Vermont Teddy Bear Factory, which is one of our wishing spaces, and our newest wishing space in Saratoga Springs, New York. Before that, I've worked for the Orvis Company as a senior manager of conservation, as well as social responsibility work. But really where the foundation for my nonprofit work or for this show, for leadership positions, it was at Orvis as well, but for more defined leadership position would be my work addressing civilian victims of war in former and current combat zones, military hot areas. But I started in Vietnam. And when we started in Vietnam, it was 1997. So it was a different world. So that's where I cut my teeth, was on international work, and then into Make-A-Wish. So I've had a really great career. When I speak about, I love speaking about this stuff because I've learned a lot from a lot of really smart people, and I love to give them credit. So that's where I am now. So I've been working now at Make-A-Wish for just over a decade. As I started as the CEO of Make-A-Wish Vermont, and then we merged with Make-A-Wish Northeast New York in this last couple of years. So that's where I am now.
awesome. Thank you, Jamie.
Jamie, you bring up, and it's a little bit of a different time, but you're over in Vietnam, and as somebody that is probably uneducated and ignorant in that sense, like, doesn't that timeline being in Vietnam representing like that doesn't add up? What my version of the history book. So what were you doing, and what could you talk about that a little?
What a great question, and really well put, Cam. And I really like that how you put it. So when people think of Vietnam, they think of Vietnam not as a country. They think of it as a war. They think of it as an era, right? Most Americans think of Vietnam as in just that specific way, right? What I learned in 1996, 1997 was that the war didn't end in Vietnam when it ended for us. Not only in that it still goes on for our our veterans. That war is still going on for our veterans, of course, and psychological trauma, but also, of course, physical trauma from a number of different areas. But what I learned about the Vietnamese people in 1996 was that unexploded ordnance (UXO) is scattered all over the region, specifically in the former DMZ, which was the 17th parallel, which divided North and South Vietnam, in a region approximately the size of Vermont. I'm just saying that it's not exactly, so don't hold me to it. Any historians out there, went through the longest sustained bombing campaign in the history of the world. More bombs were dropped in that region than in World War I and World War II combined. So if you look at the failure rate on unexploded ordnance dropped from the sky, and then mortars and shells and all of that, and then landmines, which were actually the rare piece, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of pieces of ordnance that will last well into the future. So when I learned about it, I thought, well, there was an organization that was doing something about it, and we got involved. So that's the part of the history books that's a little more obscure, right? That's the piece. And I think a lot of people, civilians in general, don't recognize that a war doesn't have a time frame. A war is a virus. A war spreads into other regions and other parts of time. And at least in my experience, you would know this much better than I would, Colonel, but war is never a contained thing. It tends to spread like a virus. And this has spread into time as opposed to into regions, right? And so we were addressing the regional effects of the longest sustained bombing campaign in history, and being able to be a part of that, and removing some of that ordnance we could talk about in a little bit. But that's where I was there, Cam, and that's what I learned back when I was in my 20s in 1990 and 1995, 1996, and that launched my career in nonprofit work. It's a lot.
No, I think that's outstanding, Jamie. And I just, I wanted to say thank you for doing the work that you've done, not just with Make-A-Wish, of course, but just with regards to co-founding Clear Path International, CPI, and doing all that, because it's meaningful. And I would have to fathom
Thank
that
you.
probably, if you look at in the context of today, if you just take what's happening in Eastern Europe with Ukraine, I would
Yeah.
imagine there's probably going to be some version of CPI that has to
Yeah.
go in there and do those things, because you're talking about, I mean, those are places where people either have lived, currently live, or will live. And so, I mean, that's going to be a challenge, for them as well. And
Yeah. Yeah, and
so,
don't forget Chernobyl, where they can never live again. That's in Ukraine as well.
right,
So speaking to the virus of war and the incompatibility, I mean, not the incompatibility, but the unpredictability of that, and the unintended circumstances of professionals, right?
right,
That
exactly,
that are
right.
that are asked to do a very specific thing, and that specific thing becomes the law of unintended consequences, right?
Exactly, right.
And so what I worked with when I was working in unexploded ordnance removal, and we were working with retired military primarily, but also the State Department, were people that recognized that this wasn't the intention, right?
Right.
This wasn't the intention. The intention was never for, in 1997 or in 2025, for a child or an adult to stumble upon a piece of ordnance that had a very specific cause at the time, and now it's injuring people well beyond what anyone could have imagined. And so the professionalism that I witnessed from the U.S. military and from the State Department and from people that wanted to address this issue was extraordinary. And the reception we received back in the late 90s, thanks to Princess Diana and her work with addressing the issue and bringing it to the fore, we were able to get involved. But the support we got as kids, I mean, I was in my 20s. I was in my 20s. And imagine a kid in their 20s coming to you and telling them they want to remove a bunch of bombs in Vietnam. You would have laughed.
Right.
The funny thing is, though, you guys, my name is Jamie, and most people know me as Jamie, And when I started working in Vietnam, I wasn't yet in the country, but I was working on grant applications and things of that nature, and trying to get permissions from different government agencies and things in a foreign country and in our own. I changed my name to James to sound just a little bit older.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't be walking in like Jamie, or at least in my. So I went to James for a long time. So I go back and forth, and whenever I'm in trouble, I switch back to James, so people give me a little bit more respect.
Right. Yeah. When you're calling customer service someplace and they're like, "Yeah, who is this?" Yeah, it's James Hathaway calling.
Yeah.
You know,
Sounds a lot more respectable, right?
it sounds a
So
lot more
so
respectful.
so yeah, and I would even lean on my James Allen Hathaway Jr. waspy roots whenever I needed to.
No, that's funny.
James, can I ask, like, or
Yeah.
Jamie, can I ask,
Yeah.
how long were you there? What was the status? Like, when
Sure.
you
Are we talking
left?
about Vietnam specifically? Now, let me tell you a little bit about what happened with ClearPath. In ClearPath, we started actually as another organization called Peace Trees Vietnam, and I was working with them when I first got. They're still around. Peace Trees is still around. They're still doing the work. My organization, ClearPath, no longer is, and we'll talk about that when we talk about, if we get into, which I hope we do, about integrity and responsibility and unintended circumstance results of good actions. But we started in the late 90s, and we started with Peace Trees Vietnam. Then we formed our own thing. Peace Trees Vietnam wanted to stay in one province in the DMZ. We wanted to take our model, which was from the ground up project design, not a cookie cutter we brought to other people. We were like, we're going to go into these communities that are largely isolated, that you can't apply something that was developed at James Madison University and apply that to a place in Quang Tri province. You can't. You have to be on the ground. And so we wanted to take our model of ground up program development into other regions in Vietnam and also Cambodia at the time. So we split from them and formed ClearPath International as opposed to Peace Trees Vietnam. And we moved our programs out of this one province and into other provinces in Vietnam, and then off into Cambodia, and then and to Afghanistan when the U.S. government requested our assistance for civilian for addressing civilian injuries in all regions of Afghanistan. So to answer your question, Kim, a little more, our programs were in Vietnam up until 2013. So they started in 1997. I was in Vietnam on and off. I never stayed there longer than 6 weeks. We had 2 children at the time, and my ex-wife and I formed the program together. So she would stay home or I would stay home and take care of the kids, or sometimes we brought the kids with us, which was really great. So our footprint, my personal time in Vietnam lasted from 1997 to about 2012, and our work inspired other work there, and the work goes on, but by other people. The unexploded ordnance issue. Let me be clear about that. That's an extraordinarily expensive process. EOD is insanely expensive, and it should be. It should be. It's like Howard Stern said one time, why divorce is so expensive? It's worth it. That's why spending a lot of money on ordnance disposal is worth it. Don't cut corners. And so we were conscripted U.S. Vietnamese military, trained by retired U.S. military, directed by a couple of hippies from Vermont in removing bombs, right? So that lasted for a short time though, Cam, okay? And I want to be clear about that because that got to be too expensive for us. When you talk about an icebreaker, a ship, it's the small point that breaks the initial ice, right? And so we were the small organization. We were like the smoke jumpers, and then big organizations got involved, And so what did is we were able to recruit very significant funding from the United States civilians, right? Just people, specifically those that founded AIG, the family that founded AIG funded us in a big way in the early days. But it got too expensive. So then government took over and started in a good way, in a really great way. When you say government took over, most people go, no, it was a significant State Department project that started funding humanitarian demining. We then moved into victim assistance, which is per individual, a lot less expensive, right? When we were working, it would take us, I think, $2 million to do 10 hectares in Vietnam, something like that. That's insane. That's not a lot of land, And the only way you can really address an issue like that is significant government funding over time with established organizations. So we went into victim assistance. So working with a child on prosthetics or whatever is a lot less expensive, and the work has a large impact. So then that went into victim assistance, which we focused on for the next 10.
Okay, great. And then, while it's forefront, do you want to talk about getting out of or exiting, ClearPath International and
Yeah,
those
it was really
unintended
difficult.
consequences?
Yeah, it was a difficult thing for me because I loved ClearPath. I loved the work we were doing. I loved the impact that we were having, which felt to me historic at the time, and it was when we look back on 1998. Normalization of relations between our countries wasn't until 1995 between the U.S. and Vietnam. talk about being at the crossroads of history at that moment. And okay, what does it look like? And there was a thing called Doi Moi in Vietnam, which opened up markets, and it was kind of quasi capitalism, quasi communism. And we were able to see we were able to see it change like that. I was able to take it through its life cycle. I was able to see all the things we could do. And then when it became something that was no longer a force for good, we were able to shut it down. And I feel really good about that, actually. But it was a tough time, and it was a lot of soul searching. It was a lot of gray hair. I blame my gray hair on that. I'd look so good right now. I would be so. God, I'd be doing all right. I'd be doing all right. So, so that's what happened, and that's.
I think, Jamie, this is a good time to talk for anybody listening. We do have a YouTube platform where you can see Jamie in full fledged and how good he looks. So that's just a
There you go.
good kick to our YouTube operations.
With my Grateful Dead mug, which I got for my birthday from my girlfriend, and I thought I'd use it today.
There you go.
So so then I went into sort of a wilderness, I went into a wilderness of my own making, and I had to rediscover where I wanted to go in my life. And I felt at the time that my best work was behind me, and that I had lost something that I could never gain again. And that's a sense of purpose, and I think a lot of us, a coach and a colonel will understand the sense of purpose. And so I had a difficult time, a very difficult time in my life trying to figure out who I am and if I had anything worth giving anymore. You know what I mean? And when you go through something like that, where you give up your, I did it. I did it to myself. And here's the thing: this was my mind. This is the naivete, right, of leadership that we often have, and these things come up, and you're like, oh my goodness, that doesn't happen. People double down. People blame the person that's bringing the truth, oftentimes. But I miss it. I think we did a lot of great work, and so I left and was lost for a little bit before I found Make-A-Wish.
Thank you, Jamie. When I think about the work that you did with CPI and all of that, and I think about the work that you've done with Make-A-Wish, intrinsically, I look at you as just somebody who just cares deeply for humanity and cares deeply for others. And that I would say that even though you feel like you lost your sense of purpose, and to a certain extent, probably your identity.
Yeah.
I think at your core, I would have to recognize that you're just an incredible human being who just wants to do right. And I've known you for several years now. I've always felt like your integrity is above board, that you've always put others' needs before yourself, that your moral compass is firmly pointed in the right direction. And that's just one of the many things I love about you. And if you could talk to a little bit of how you kind of came back to Make-A-Wish, or just something that if you could just talk to that, I think folks would love to hear that, because if you look back across your span of work for the past, almost 3 decades, very little of it, if any, is to help out James Hathaway.
No, it does help me though. Thank you, Matt. I love that you said that, and I really appreciate that. And I have not taken an oath of poverty or anything like that. I haven't. But what I have done, and I think this is true, is I've taken the opportunity in order to I've taken the opportunity in my amount of doing well in my life before I was even born. I was born into Dorset, Vermont. It's a very privileged area. It is. I am you can tell here, I'm a white guy from New England, right? And being a white guy from New England and where I was born gave me access to the levers of power that most people don't have. And having access to that, and when I was a kid, I heard this song Imagine by John Lennon when I was in like 3rd grade. It's so trite and silly, but that's really what the thing that dialed the knob for me was like, this, we could, it doesn't have to be this way. And it's up to us to change things. And the chain reaction of good work is powerful. It doesn't take much when you build a Jenga tower, right? It doesn't take much to flick a frickin' cube out and knock the whole thing down. The real work is in building it. And the people that build that tower and work on it are always at risk of someone knocking a cube out like a jerk, But my jobs have been, I'm specifically, specifically capable of connecting with people, I think. And I enjoy human beings. I enjoy the unique story everybody has. I like hearing it. And I think I've been able to turn those stories into packages I could bring to donors and say, these are things worthy of support. And I think that's what I do well. I love the kids we work with at Make-A-Wish. Oh my gosh, and may I speak for a minute to Peyton, and I don't know if you speak to it very often. Matt and his family, I don't know if you speak to it, Matt, but they lost a sweet soul in your son, and a kind, intelligent boy who I got to know in a really great way, right, Matt? We got to we got to tell your son that his wish was coming true in a packed auditorium at a basketball game. And I fist bumped your kid right when we was telling him. And it's a great picture, isn't it?
It's
You know,
awesome. Absolutely.
and we're telling him that his dream is going to come true and that he's going to get to design a sneaker of his own, a sneakerhead. The guy, the kid knew sneakers and designed his own sneaker. And I get to be a part of that good story. Holy cow, right? Holy cow. I get to be a piece of the good story and to carry Peyton in my heart forever. And that's the gift back to me, that I'm able to be this dude who otherwise you would probably avoid, seeing him become, look at me, you're not going to strike up a conversation with me, So I get to be a part of people's lives in a really beautiful way where we get to be the good part of a sad story. And we get to be the part where you reflect on, all right, there's a lot of terrible things in the world, but we get to focus on the good part. And that's what my job is. Every day I come to work, is testament to the better side of the human nature, right? Every day I come to work, I'm paid because people care enough about people they'll never meet to give away hard-earned money so someone's life could be better. Where do I have room for misanthropy, right? Where do I have room not to have faith in the human condition when I get to have a home because people care about each other, right? And that's something, Matt, that I was able to learn early on in my life, is that there is a good part of humanity that I get, not just but I get to represent, right? And so when someone donates money, I'm representing that person. And I walk through life and through my job because there's kindness in the world that is expressed in no uncertain way in the in donating money, time, and love to what we do. So it's a long answer to at least to your statement around, do I feel lucky? Oh God, yes. And I got to do it when I was young, before I had anything to lose, and I could give everything to this career. So, but also, if I may, I'm a high school dropout. I'm a college dropout. I never finished anything. And so so when you talk about, hey, you gave all this you're such a good dude. I had no choice. I had to succeed. And I had no room for mediocrity. It had to be something extraordinary. And when Vietnam came up, I recognized at the time, this could be something that is unique in my life that brings value. And we're talking about management, right? Let's talk about Tom Peters for a minute. If you guys are familiar with Tom Peters, In Search of Excellence, and a book he wrote in the 90s, the 80s, it became big in the 90s, I believe. But Tom Peters wrote about what inspired me. And I encourage everybody who's out there, who's anybody at any point in your career, read a very dated article from Fast Company in the 90s called Brand You. And it was on the cover of Fast Company magazine, Tom Peters. And if I didn't know Tom Peters as a personal friend in Dorset, Vermont, I would not have picked up the magazine. But I recognized his name. And Brand You, the concept of Brand You, was before influencers, right? It was before we could create our own podcasts or anything else. We didn't have brands of our own. We didn't think of ourselves as brands, but we are. We're brands unto ourselves. And what about a personal brand makes you unique and valuable? I read that article back when I was ready to leave Peachtree's Vietnam because it was so much work. I'd stay up all night long, guys. I had a job. I had other jobs, by the way, when I was doing Peachtree's and ClearPath. My wife got paid by ClearPath and Peachtree's, but not much. And so I had another job working during the day, and then all night I'd work because if you look at the time, it's a lot different in Vietnam, so we'd be talking with our crew in Vietnam. I'd be developing pieces. So what was it? Why I wanted to leave? What was it? It was Brand You that inspired me to recognize that the Vietnam piece, if I were to be successful, if my family, my ex-wife and I were to be successful in Vietnam, it wouldn't matter if I graduated from anywhere. It didn't matter. What would matter is I'm proving myself in a very difficult part of the world at 27 that I can do something very complicated. So I read that article, and I think it's called Love Marks in the article, or something in that. What are the love marks that make you unique? Every one of us has it. What is it? What have you dedicated yourself to that has been that you have contributed to the world in a unique way? And that's what's going to make you unique in the marketplace of employment. right? And so at the time, I started building my personal brand in the hopes that someday it would result in a job like I have today. And so I started working on my brand. I started working on, it was before SEO and it was before blogs. So we developed an actual blog before they existed. So we could develop content that was consistently being put on the internet. Why'd we do it? Because we didn't have a budget for printing and everybody was printing at the time. So we thought we can put stuff online that people will find instead of print. And then when Google became big, which was right around the same time, we had all this content. So everybody, it was pointing to us online all the time. Right? So all the Google searches were coming up with my dopey little organization. And we started making a lot of money because we SEO'd before people knew what it was. So Tom Peters, brand you, building your personal brand is still important, and with integrity and continuity, and make sure it makes sense. So that's what inspired me to stay with Vietnam. And when I address this, Matt, when you say you're a good guy to me and all that, which I appreciate and thank you, a lot of it was self-preservation. It was, how do I create a job out of something I'm good at, which is relating to other people. Oh, you're going to, I know I tell a scattered story. So when I say storytelling, you'll be like, yeah, you haven't finished this story yet. This is, you're not good at it. But storytelling, being able to tell a story from somebody else's perspective. I wanted to be a journalist. And so that's what inspired me. So when you talk about that, Matt, I refer back to, yeah, but I had no choice. It's like complimenting somebody for being really a fast runner coming out of a burning building. I was like, I got to do something. You ran fast. Yeah, of course I ran fast. The place is on fire. And that's what was happening to me at the time. How do I develop something to my skill set that's outside of people caring that I don't have a degree and I never graduated from high school?
I know Kim has a question, but I just want to go back to something real quick. The Make-A-Wish thing. You mentioned that obviously you're creating a memory or a positive situation for the person who's being granted the wish. And I know you know this, but just if you're ever talking to a family that you're granting a wish to, or the recipient, if you will, even though Peyton's not here anymore, like that Make-A-Wish had a profound impact on us as a family. And so like,
Yeah.
I know you're granting it to the recipient, and the recipient, all the things that he experienced and stuff like that, but that was as much for us, I think, as it was for Peyton. And so we shared in his glee and his fervor and excitement and all that sort of stuff, and his sneakers live on today, and that memory lives on. And I had never been to Oregon in my life at all, never been to University of Oregon, never been to Nike headquarters, never met, Tinker Hatfield, designing Michael Jordan's sneakers and stuff like that. And so I miss Peyton every day, and I know you do too, and I know Cam does this. I know Cam does as well. But like, I just wanted to let our listeners know and our viewers know that, like, again, through your leadership and your team, your elite team that you have in Vermont, and then and then Oregon has just as an elite team, and probably every state.
Yeah, Layla Cook is my buddy. Yeah. Yeah.
Layla,
you met Layla, right? You met Layla.
I did. I got off the airplane and Layla was right there. So I met her. Yeah. She's awesome. She's fantastic.
Well,
but
I resent Layla because she's so good at what she does. Oh my goodness. I just think she's a rock star. And may I speak to that a little bit about what you just spoke to?
100%.
And thanks for bringing it back to Make-A-Wish, because I'll talk about bombs, billionaires, and rock stars in my other life all day long. But I love this piece because what you just touched on, you nailed it. So we don't serve just children. We serve children, families, and communities. Because when a child is sick, a family is sick, right, Matt? A whole family gets sick. And when a family gets sick, an entire community gets sick. Cam, I'm sure you've known Matt for a long time, right? So that you got sick too, right? And so we're all carrying this piece. And even the folks, Matt, that got to watch Peyton's wish coming true in Burlington, right? Before he left for Oregon.
Right.
We're addressing the suffering of the human condition, right? And we're able to touch on something universal, which is the love for children,
right?
Which is that we all have. And then Make-A-Wish is designed to confront fear with love. That's all it is. I'm sorry to make it so simple and kind of corny, but we confront fear with love. And so a family, a community that's fearing the loss of a child or a child's or watching a child go through something horrific, as many of our children go through, then to see how you can help, how you can be a part of it, what's the piece that's bringing us together as people to lift this family up, and everybody involved feels a little bit better. Everybody involved feels a little bit better. Everybody in that, they were cheering. Remember the cheering? You probably don't. You were in a bubble. And beautiful picture, the beautiful picture, Matt's crying behind me, and you're wiping a tear away. And he's a tough colonel, he's a tough dude. But what we were bringing to people in that moment was so purely human and beautiful. If that can lift that lifts entire communities at the same time. So we serve children, their families, and their communities because those are the people that get sick. And in looking at it that way, a Make-A-Wish isn't something you get. I think I may have said this to you guys before you left on your trip. I say this to most of our families that I get to see before they go or do something. And I'm not involved in the actual implementation of wishes, but I'm able to say to families all the time, it's not about getting something. Make-A-Wish isn't about getting something. It's about being a part of something, not feeling alone, and knowing that people out there, no matter if they know you or not, they care about you. And we're all in this together when it's about childhood illness. So if you can tap into that sort of energy, that is not just about the kid, that it's about Matt, it's about his family, it's about the families that love that family, it's about your workmates. When a child is sick, everybody gets sick, and we're all scared, and we all love kids. And that's the universal that doesn't matter anything else that's going on in the world. I can show up in a room now with people of every political bent. Nobody cares. We care about the kid there, and we care about working on this stuff. No one mentions it. You can't go anywhere anymore without people mentioning the conflict we're all in. It goes away. It goes away. And it's just about love and taking care of each other and being there for each other.
Well, that's really well said, Jamie. And again, I've said this 1,000 times and I'll say it 1,000 times more. You guys work miracles and you guys make people feel special. And you made Peyton feel like he was the only Make-A-Wish grantee in the world at that time.
He was, but he was.
Yeah.
You know what?
Right.
The resources that we put into, that wasn't an illusion. We spoke with Oregon, the Make-A-Wish network fires itself up. And in those moments, there isn't anybody else. When you stepped off the plane, you know how many people were there with you that you couldn't see? And that Layla represented all of us. And what a great person to represent us, And so when kids come here, I think of that too. And I think I am a representation of the goodwill of this community and around the world that makes Make-A-Wish possible. I am fortunate enough to stand in the shoes of the CEO of this organization and to be with a family. I'll often get down on my knees so I'm not looking down at a kid, because he's my boss. You guys probably talk about servant leadership, right? You guys talk about servant leadership here. And so my job, once I became CEO of this thing, I work for everybody. I work for the donors. I work for my staff. I work for the Wish Kids. I work for the families. But most importantly, I work to make sure that I am representing what I believe is one of the most pure brands in the world at addressing human suffering. And it's the purity of it and the amount of love that comes out of communities. I get to represent it. So it's a big responsibility, but that's how I feel. That's how I'm able to maintain a level of work that is pretty, it's pretty demanding,
Well, Make-A-Wish is very fortunate to have a leader such as yourself that's so grounded.
I love that. Dude, coming from you, Colonel, that's a huge deal. Cam, you got to step it up. It
up. Jamie, I want to use, I'm fired up just listening to you. And again, I echo Colonel just thanking you, but I want you to take a moment. You've mentioned donors. I'm just looking down here, 120 wishes a year in our area, which is, roughly 3 a day or 1 every 3 days. That means in your 10 years, we're looking at, 1,200 wishes. And again, that's not free. And I've asked Matt a little bit about his experience. And that, again, that wasn't, hey, an offer of you get to do this if your family pays this. So can you talk just a little bit about those donors, or if somebody wants to get involved or anything like that? Because again, I think the work you're doing is phenomenal.
Well, thanks, Cam. Yeah, wishes are magic, but they're not free. And thanks for bringing that up. Before I worked at Make-A-Wish, and I think most people think this, I believe that everything that Make-A-Wish gets is probably donated. You probably call a United Airlines representative and say, hey, I got a Make-A-Wish kid here. He wants to go to Florida. Like, all right, we'll put him right through. Show up. Let's put him on the first plane out of here. Nah, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all, as a matter of fact. So we're just in line like everybody else, and we have to shop for better prices. There are times, of course, when we have partnerships with large organizations. Being Make-A-Wish has a lot of benefits, right? But it doesn't mean we get things for free. So how we raise money, a lot of our money comes from external events like Matt has run before that benefited Make-A-Wish. Internal events like Matt has attended with his family before, the Beardies and stuff. Matt's all the way down the line. Matt's been an attendee for everything we could possibly do, except board member. We should talk about that someday, Matt. You'd be a great board member.
I'm in.
You know, it'll be a year. We got a bunch of people that won't move. They're not budgeted. They love it. So, but it'll be a bit. But the money comes from events, but largely from everyday folks going to wish.org/donate. So it's wish.org/donate, or Google how do I donate to Make-A-Wish, and make sure you're donating to the chapter in your region. Or if you want to donate to Make-A-Wish America as a governing umbrella, which we all need these things, right? I heard a great phrase recently on a podcast. I love this. You're going to really love this, you guys. Bureaucracy is often people like, oh, bureaucracy. Without bureaucracy, 19-year-olds couldn't run an aircraft carrier, right? Without bureaucracy, these things don't happen. So these things have to happen. We need to have infrastructure that creates the support network necessary for people to do their jobs. So you need people like, oh, I don't want to pay for overhead. Pay for overhead. You want to pay for people like Matt to be able to direct people. You want to lead people. You need those sorts of things. But anyway, go to Make-A-Wish, go to wish.org/donate. You can donate to chapters individually, or you can donate to our governing body, which makes sure we're all doing the right thing, which I support as well. Or have an event. A family just had an event in Barrie, Vermont, just over the weekend that raised about 10 grand for us. So there are ways to do it which can involve your communities as we support children in scary situations.
Jamie, just so you know, Cam has been involved with Air Payton ever since its inception.
Hey, all right.
And,
Thank you, Cam.
And
Yeah.
I mean, he's been everything from his hours to donate to
Yeah.
leading his team, back when he was the coach and stuff like that. So to donating toys, to just his time involved and all that sort of stuff. And also we've just formalized Air Payton, Jamie. So Air Payton is now a 501c3, which makes it.
Is it really?
It is. So to make it.
Yeah.
Now Make-A-Wish Vermont and Make-A-Wish, your organization can be part of our cross check, and it just becomes a little bit easier. There, again, the necessary bureaucracy, right, to deliver the final effect that we need to deliver. So, and you inspired us, Jamie, to go in that direction. So, thank you.
I love it. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
But,
I like calling you Colonel, by the way. I do this even in our personal calls. I do this.
I know.
I do this, Cam. I call him Colonel all the time. It was a colonel that actually launched my career, by the way, a colonel in the Air Force. He was somebody that our largest donor, he'd come to one of our events and knew me personally, and put me in touch with, back in 1997, put me in touch with a very wealthy person. His name was Colonel Jeff Chapman from Vermont. And he was an Air Force colonel. And I don't know if that was his final rank, but he was such a kind man and really cared about. And he even said to me, he's like, I'm the guy that pulled the lever on dumping a lot of that stuff over there. So let's go over and pick up the stuff that went where it wasn't supposed to. Wow. And so so it was a colonel in the Air Force that lifted me from obscurity.
Jamie, I'm really excited to hear just some of the spinoff of like kind of your worldview. When Matt and I started, for right, wrong, or indifferent, I was somebody coming from Division I, but really my first leadership opportunity to run the show, and I wanted to.
Division I, fantastic.
But I had an opportunity, and I wanted to do it a certain way. And some of the ways. So you talked about basically the Make-A-Wish confronting fear with love, but again, I feel like maybe that was a little bit of you in Vietnam or at different parts of your life, and just
right.
You also mentioned just the tension worldview, and again, I'm not trying to create anything other than, could you just speak to the mountains that you've seen moved in the name of love versus maybe the hate and the anger that we live in currently?
I think we live in an era of fear more than hate, and I think people are led to believe that they should fear people rather than understand them. Matt, I sent you that thing to read, and there's a book by the former Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, brutal bombing campaigns that he designed. But what he learned, he had a book called In Retrospect, and he said that we have an unwillingness to learn what motivates the other side and why do they feel this way? What are their cultural biases that are leading to this situation that I could try to understand instead of demonizing? And I'm trying to take that to people that have different political bents than me and understanding, all right, what is the motivation that brought them here? Instead of being angry and dehumanizing someone in a situation, why don't we look at, okay, what motivates them? What's motivating them to feel this way? Beyond any sort of propaganda campaigns, which are, of course, important to understand and all that sort of thing too. But what within those campaigns are motivating people that are their basic fears that they're able to touch on and get them to, feel this way. And I'm strongly right now, I'm trying to understand the people that I too am angry at, or feeling like we're throwing words around like un-American and all these sorts of things. There are lots of versions of being an American. There are a lot of versions of being an American. And how do we not necessarily embrace them? You don't have to embrace them, but understand them, understand where they're coming from. And that's what Robert McNamara was asking about, why we got in so much trouble in Vietnam is we refused willfully, we were willfully ignorant around what was motivating the North Vietnamese and what was motivating Ho Chi Minh, right? And we didn't understand it. And if we had understood it better, we could have avoided that whole thing. But it was the human piece. It was not an unstoppable force of history that we wound up there where we wound up. It was because we didn't understand the human motivations of Ho Chi Minh and all these sorts of things that we could have understood better and addressed without turning into this is a Grateful Dead hippie perspective, grew up in Vermont sort of thing. So don't send me hate mail, but I do believe that all sides need to be understood a little bit better. But at the same time, there's still evil in the world. And there's still an evil in the world that we need to address. But maybe on the ground, people like me that aren't in charge of pulling the levers all the time can bring a little bit more understanding of the people that we have a hard time with. That's so corny, but that's the only thing.
No, listen, it's well said. And again, it comes back to a little bit of communication, a little openness, a little bit listening, right?
Yeah,
And
right, Cam?
trying to
Yeah,
have empathy and humility to
yeah,
look at somebody's a different lens, right? And
yeah. If Robert McNamara would say it, Robert McNamara, and those of you who are military historians, the actual line in the 17th parallel of Vietnam, you know what the Vietnamese call it? You call it McNamara's Folly because he was dropping all these bombs on the 17th parallel. It's called McNamara's Folly. There's even a sign there that calls it that. May not be there anymore after normalization of relations. They may have been like, take the sign out, but that's what they called it. And they called it McNamara's Folly because all the Vietnamese did is they went around into Cambodia, and that wound up taking down Nixon and all that. But so yeah, we could have avoided all that. Maybe McNamara before he died said this. We could have avoided all that with some human understanding. Secretary of Defense, Vietnam War. That's what he said.
Can you talk a little bit? And I do find it fascinating in the world that we live in. And again, you mentioned about branding you, and I do feel, again, my own personal belief is that's gotten spun a little bit far, or maybe
Yeah.
But what I hear from you, Jamie, and I would tell you, I would align, and I think Matt would align. Maybe just speak to people out there in leadership positions or in other positions where what fuels your fire isn't the front page. It's kind of working in the shadows. It's hard for some people to understand. I would tell you that's something that I, just truthfully looking at maybe the successes I had as a head coach are not photographed. Any trophy we won, I'm not in any picture. I don't think that was necessarily intentional at the time, but I always felt like that was theirs.
You were doing something. You're like, I got shit to do. I can't stand here for a picture.
I enjoyed being part of the journey, but it was their celebration.
Yeah,
and I never looked at it, but if you could talk to people that are in leadership positions or any position of just like maybe that it's okay, or maybe that it's a really unique trait that you're sitting here as this leader and this CEO
Read
of this.
Tom Peters. Read Tom Peters. Read it. It's so Tom Tom is still around, thank goodness. I consider him a personal mentor to me in my development. A lot of his leadership, if you want to get very, very specific, right? It's around servant leadership, but it's also around women in leadership positions. And he'll speak to the power of women as better managers than we are often, as being more empathetic than we are often, and I've found that in my running of organizations, and you know this, Matt, I empower powerful women and I get the hell out of the way. Get out of the way. Get out of the way of intelligent, driven women in your organization. That's the first thing Tom will tell you, and me too. You know why? Because women make all the decisions. When I was working in Vietnam, you know who made the real decisions? The women's union. The government entities, I would work with the government entities in Vietnam, and my ex-wife would work with the women's union, and it was with the women's union that the real work got done. So get out of the way of empower women in the workplace. Leadership that is servant leadership that's based on you working for everybody else. You're now working for everybody else. And my job is giving them the best job they ever had, and lifting them up individually, recognizing their unique traits that they bring to a position. There's lots of money in the world. There's only one of every one of my employees. There's only one of them. And if I lose one of them, you know how much money it costs to lose one person? So invest in those people for their unique talents that they bring that may be unorthodox, recognizing them the strengths that they have intrinsically as being a human being. They have something there that is uniquely valuable, and finding their unique challenges where you can, as an employer, you can address their unique challenges in such a way that you can give them a quality of life that they don't get anywhere else. I don't think my team could possibly get, I hope, anyway, could possibly get the attention to quality of life that I give, that we give our employees. We put them at the front of everything. And I'm sorry, Matt, but I don't put wish families at the top of my list. Because if I did, the employees, if we got a difficult wish family, and they're not all families are like yours, man. And so there's an entitlement that comes around sometimes. We've been around 45 years, right? We've been around longer than most of the parents now of children have been around. And so they see Make-A-Wish as an entitlement, some people, not everybody, but it's enough that it would. So if I took everything that wish family said and I was like this, I said, this is it. No, I default to the side of my team and I say, okay, you're not unreasonable people. You're not out here to hurt people. You're an intelligent person doing a very hard job. And I put them ahead of that. I put my employees ahead of everything. I take their side as a default and I tell them that. So I'm going to back you up initially every single time. Right. But don't lie to me. They wouldn't, but I'm going to be out there and I'm going to stand up for you because you're uniquely valuable to me. And I can find other money. There'll be other wish family. There'll be other things. We're going to go on. What can't happen. It's a time zero. My morale score. We do this thing with Make-A-Wish. It's called the Gallup Engagement Score. And you as business people probably have heard of it before. It's the Q12, the 12 questions of the Gallup Engagement Score that they have all over the country. The Gallup Engagement Score in Northeast New York before we took over from Make-A-Wish Vermont was at 13% against the whole country. 13 percentile. That means 87 other organizations were better to work at than ours, right? This last year we were in the 96th percentile. So we took it from a 13 to a 96 because we went with people first, those being my people first, structure, make their lives better. You're not going to get rich working for Make-A-Wish, but I'm going to give you a lot of time off. I'm going to let you come in late on Monday mornings. I'm going to let you do things like that. We're going to break free on Friday. We're going to recognize that you have difficult things that I'll never know about that you bring to work, whether or not they want to be there, and to be supportive of these human beings undergoing unique challenges that I will never know, making their lives easier, putting them at the top of my priority list because everything filters down from them, including the joy that Matt felt on his trip, and that's what I try to do. So I try to we're employees first, period. And then my board is under there, right? And donors are under there and wish families are under there because if I don't have a good team on the front lines on this thing, then they aren't going to make decisions that make the world a better place for our wish families. They're going to be bitter. And instead, I want them to feel supported. Does that answer your question?
Unbelievably.
Thanks. But that goes back to Tom Peters. Read Tom Peters. The guys, here's the thing about Tom. He's a crazy man, and I knew him very well, but he's a lunatic. He's a lunatic. And we would sit in my parents' store because I grew up in a country store in southern Vermont, and I met all these wonderful people because I lived in a place called Dorset, Vermont. And Dorset, Vermont is I hate to say it like this, but it's waspy to the point of self-parody. It's like very much one of those New England towns. It has a country club. It has a thing. It's like, oh God, that's too much, But working in the family store, we were working people in this very wealthy community, and I would work the front counter, and I'd meet all these extraordinary people, including Tom Peters, and be able to have these conversations. So read them. So Tom and I would sit at the front counter because he'd walk for exercise. And he always had this huge wad of cash. And I was like, one day I was like, what the hell do you do that you can walk around in sweatpants in a town like this and then bust out a fat roll of cash? And he goes, oh, I do this thing. I've written a bunch of books. And then we started talking about just the human condition a lot. We became very good friends. I wrote on his blog for a while when I was traveling through Southeast Asia. I have nothing but affection and respect for this man. So his stuff gets a little kooky near the end. It gets wild and the exclamation points and wait until you check him out. But the basis of what he's saying is it's about respect. It's about respecting the people that need your support in order to do a good job, and not feeling like they work for you, but you work for them. And flip that shit. Sorry, flip that stuff, and you're going to have a better workplace. I believe it anyway. But I work I have to say it's very easy for me to say that. I work in Make-A-Wish. I work in an organization which people love and respect. I can do things. It's much harder to probably run a bowling alley using my concept, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. I don't know why I chose bowling alley. I don't know. We should go bowling.
I would say I don't disagree, and I think Matt and I share in that sentiment of like, we serve the people around us. Hopefully that's the legacy we left in our previous roles and continue to do moving forward. So I think it's really well said, and value your time and thank you. And one of the things we like to do towards the end is give you space to, I know you've talked about, some different people that have impacted you, but like really open floor for you to really just share appreciation to other support.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you for that. Yeah, so people that inspired me in my life, Fred Buechner was a neighbor of mine, and I'm not a religious guy. He's a minister. He wrote some really beautiful books on philosophy based on Christianity, which I found to be absolutely inspirational and empathy and understanding empathy. So that was Fred Buechner. Tom Peters, of course, we talked about him to death, but the people that inspire me the most, and this is really corny, are the wisdom of our children in our program. And this sort of wisdom I imagine it's very similar in the military. You know what I mean? When you're addressed with things that are so extraordinary that you gain a knowledge about how the world works that a lot of people don't get. And I think there's a certain loneliness that comes with people returning from battle or returning from a mission where you've been plugged into something so important and so big, you know, that you feel the rest of the world couldn't possibly understand. You know what I mean? And there's a loneliness, and not just PTSD, but just the basics of being plugged into something really big and then disconnected and feeling like people don't understand you. I think that same thing is with our kids. I think they feel a lot that people just don't understand what they've been through, and they have been they've been to battle with or in the game like you would be, Cam, so that they're in the middle of this very stressful thing that they've gained a lot of wisdom and a lot of humor. Actually, our kids are funny. Peyton was very funny, you know, and our kids gain a certain wisdom about how the world works. So my wish kids inspire me. I'll talk about Tom Peters all day long. We could talk about him for an hour, but please read about him. And I hope that he continues to get respect in his approach to people first management. Fred Buechner and the Grateful Dead. So much of the Grateful Dead. I am such a deadhead, you guys, and I get a lot of my inspiration from music and art, and being able to be transported into another place. One thing that I found is very helpful. The secret to happiness has been talked about. This is something that was credited to, what's his name? I'll leave the light on for you. What's his name from Motel 6? He's a Vermonter. Remember?
Tom Bodette.
I'm Tom Bodette. We'll leave
Yeah.
the light on for you. It's been credited to Tom Bodette. He's a Vermonter. He's a friend of mine. He lives he lives in Brattleboro, but he's often credited with saying this. He says he didn't say it. So the secret to happiness is someone to love, right? And so Make-A-Wish reminds you that someone loves you, right? So someone to love, something to do. Make-A-Wish reminds you of something to do. Have something to do. Let's plan a trip. Let's do something. And then something to look forward to. That's 3, not 4. I said 4, but that's 3 things, right? Then something to look forward to. Someone to love, something to do, something to look forward to, which is the wish that we've created together, whether that's a job we've created together, whether it's a game we're addressing together. And that's what I've heard is the secret to happiness. And I also think that's the secret of Make-A-Wish, is we're reminding you you're not alone. We are giving you something to work on that occupies your mind in a creative way. And then we give you something to look forward to, which reminds you that we're moving through time, and this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And moving into that space. And then recognizing that good shit passes too. This too shall pass when you're in a good spot and appreciating it. And those are the things.
Thank you so much, Jamie. We appreciate your time. We know you're busy, and your perspective is just so invaluable, not just from Make-A-Wish, not just from CPI and all your nonprofit work and stuff like that, but just from a humanity perspective. We value you and my family and I love you very much. So thank you, Jamie.
I love you right back, and please give them my love for the holidays, and come see us in Vermont. You won't believe what we've done at the Wishing Space. We've created a big theater and everything, so come see us.